Aloha inspired moneymaker. Thanks for joining us today. If this is your first time here, welcome. And if you're a returning viewer or listener, welcome back. It's always great to have you with us. Winston Churchill once said, "We make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give." Have you ever thought about what makes a real impact and what giving is all about? Whether it's donating a few dollars, pooling resources with others in your community, or rethinking the way philanthropy works altogether, giving isn't just about money. It's about your values, your vision for the future, and your belief in making a difference. Philanthropy is evolving. It's not just for the ultra wealthy. Giving has become more inclusive, innovative, and powerful than ever before. Giving circles are bringing people together to amplify their impact. Technology is making it easier to give, track results, and stay connected to the causes you care about. And more people prioritize ethical and values-driven philanthropy. And as that happens, the question becomes, how can we give better, smarter, and more meaningfully? That's why we've assembled the panel that we have today, and I hope that we can explore all of this in today's discussion. So whether you're a seasoned philanthropist, new to giving, or just curious about how you can make an impact, you are in the right place. Before we jump in, this episode is brought to you by my financial advisory firm, Runnymede Capital Management. I want to invite you to take advantage of a 3-minute financial plan. Head over to inspiredmoney.fm/getplan. It just takes 3 minutes, and it'll give you a personalized snapshot to help you kickstart your financial journey. I hope that you'll take advantage, and then I'm happy to have a conversation with you to answer any questions you may have. Let's bring in our amazing panelists. Let me start with Sara Lomelin. She's founding CEO of Philanthropy Together, where she's growing a global movement of collective giving to resource grassroots nonprofits, shift power dynamics, and diversify philanthropy. A philanthropy disruptor and expert in collective giving, Sara frequently speaks at high-profile events like TED, and sharing her vision for democratizing philanthropy and empowering everyone to become a philanthropist. Welcome, Sara.
Thank you, Andy. Happy to be here.
We have Dr. Akhtar Badshah. He's founder of Catalytic Innovators Group and former head of Microsoft's global philanthropic efforts, where he oversaw community investments and employee contributions for over a decade. Currently a distinguished practitioner at the University of Washington, Dr. Badshah is the author of Purpose Mindset, How Microsoft inspires employees and alumni to change the world, and a leading voice. He's a leading voice in leveraging corporate and philanthropic resources for global social impact. Akhtar, I'm so excited that you made it, and in this time zone.
Yes, thank you very much, Andy. I have a difficulty reading E and P, but here we are. Thank you very much for the reminder.
Excited to have you. Emily Rasmussen, she's the founder and CEO of Grapevine, the leading platform for giving circles, which empowers donors to pool resources and create greater impact together, helping to democratize and diversify philanthropy. With a background in social entrepreneurship and nonprofit strategy, Emily has pioneered innovative fundraising models, previously serving as founding executive director of NYU's Center for Ballet and the Arts, and leading initiatives at Lincoln Center and Enterprise Solutions to Poverty. Emily, welcome.
Thank you so much, Andy. It's great to be here with all of you.
And my pleasure to welcome Richard Marker back to the show. He was in episode 2. Hopefully, we've come a long way since then. He will let us know. He will be giving us a grade at the end of this episode. Richard is the faculty co-director for executive education programs at the Center for High Impact Philanthropy and a philanthropy advisor with Wise Philanthropy, where he guides foundations and individual philanthropists on strategic decision-making. With decades of experience, he has served as CEO of major of a major foundation, taught globally, and coined the term Philanthroethics to address ethical considerations in philanthropy. I look forward to getting into that. Richard, welcome back.
Thanks very much. I think you got an A already. It's a pleasure to be with such a distinguished panel.
Thank you for grading on a curve. And I'm so excited to bring this group together. It seems that many of them know each other, and look forward to having a great conversation to better understand how we can give with greater impact. So let's get straight to it. Let's go to segment 1.
Strategic philanthropy focuses on aligning charitable efforts with measurable goals to create lasting impact. Setting clear objectives allows philanthropists to concentrate on specific causes that align with their values. Using data-driven strategies ensures these efforts address real needs and are informed by stakeholder input. Collaboration is key. Partnering with nonprofits, governments, or businesses can amplify impact, making resources go further and achieving shared goals. To measure success, outcome-based metrics track tangible results, while social return on investment quantifies the economic value created by philanthropic activities. Successful organizations like the Gates Foundation and Skoll Foundation demonstrate these principles in action. The Gates Foundation leverages outcome metrics and AI to refine its global health and education initiatives, while the Skoll Foundation evaluates the scalability of social enterprises to ensure sustainable change. By setting goals, collaborating, and measuring results, strategic philanthropy ensures that charitable giving leads to meaningful, measurable progress.
Sara, you say that everyone can be a philanthropist. What do you say to somebody who says, I'll give once I earn $1 million, or giving is for billionaires?
Really good question. Actually, I want to put my foot down in that everybody can be a philanthropist. If we move, the power of philanthropy from a few billionaires or millionaires into all of our hands, we're really changing not only who gives or how we give, but most importantly, what gets funded, right? The majority of philanthropic dollars go to the top 5% of nonprofits, just, the big nonprofits, the hospitals, the universities, the churches, right? So that leaves many community-based organizations and small grassroots nonprofits underfunded. So that is where everyday people comes in, right? We all have the capacity to give as much as or as little as we can. But the beautiful thing, and that is, where Emily and I work a lot together, is around collective giving. How, if I'm not a millionaire, if I am not a wealthy person, by getting together with my friends, with my family, with my neighbors, with my community, I can have a multiplied impact, with collective giving. So that is just rephrasing it. We all have something to give. I mean, I think we have seen it right now, and I don't want to date the podcast, but we have seen it, with the recent wildfires in LA, how communities that may be affected themselves rally together to help their neighbors, to help their communities.
It sounded like you were trying to set up Emily. So, Emily, you've been committed to economic development, improving access and microfinancing. In your experience, how can we be more purposeful and impactful?
Thank you, Andy, for that question and for that great setup, Sara. It's interesting because I used to work in microfinance and then crowdfunding, and I actually got started in this work with Grapevine because I wanted to create a more purposeful giving experience leveraging technology. And the idea was that instead of just pitching into someone else's crowdfunding campaign for the thing they care about, I wanted to create something that could engage people more in the process and help them think about what it is they cared about and help move resources to the things that are meaningful to them. And so this form of collaborative philanthropy, we talk about giving circles or collaborative funds, but really the concept is that, there's strength in numbers. Certainly when you look at the amount of money that you can give, Sara was just talking about the importance of collaboration and of getting money to smaller, more underfunded organizations. But when you look at actually the collaboration of everyday people, you can see that they can not only get money to these smaller organizations, but they can really move significant money too. And so what we see with the latest report on giving circles and the broader collaborative giving movement that came out in April of 2024, we see that Giving Circle members have moved over $3.1 billion now to nonprofits through their work. So there really is scale in those numbers, as well as that kind of scope in terms of where that money is going, in terms of the underfunded organizations and causes. And so I think to bring it back to purposeful giving, to be a part of a bigger movement like this, where if you are a smaller dollar donor and you might think, well, I don't have that much money to give, I can't make that big of an impact. If you come together and you're purposeful with your giving and learning together and getting that money to places where it's needed, you can make a significant impact, and you can really see that. And so that's kind of the whole idea of, I think, this collaborative giving movement, and where Grapevine came in too, to help bring that movement online, make it even more accessible and easy for people to get involved and participate in philanthropy, no matter where they fall on the economic spectrum.
It's incredible.
And if I can add something else, thank you, Emily, for teasing, for saying all of that. And you mentioned collaborative funds, right? And I don't know, Andy, if it will be helpful for the audience just to make that distinction, right? Like between a Giving Circle, where it's a group, mostly a group of regular people, individuals getting together to give, and then versus a collaborative fund where you have a group of mostly institutional funders that through multi-level collaborations go to do systemic change, right? In terms of there is like exchange of social capital, money, etc., and you have the collaboration between grantees, funders, policymakers, etc., as you mentioned at the beginning.
Thank you for defining that for us. Akhtar, from your experience at Catalytic Innovators Group and at Microsoft, how does using data and outcome metrics shape philanthropic decisions and partnerships? Ooh, I think you're muted.
It says the host. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. So maybe can I go a little bit off script?
Sure.
So I am really not a fan of using the word giving, simply because it just puts us in a very different frame. You only give if you've taken, and if you have. There is no reason for me to give. There is a reason for me to show up in the community. There is a reason for me to be driven by purpose. There is a reason for me to be part of the humanity and part of community. And what that means is that we all share. So if you want to really encourage the common person to participate, then we need to get out of talking about giving, because then it means that people who are doing other things are not recognized. People who help their neighbors, people who actually get food, people that are doing amazing amount of stuff in LA right now, who don't believe that they're actually giving, who believe that they are showing up as part of the community. So we need to kind of rethink how we want young people to feel, how they are part of this community. And so I understand what Sara is doing is fantastic. And I have everything she said, I completely agree with. Same thing with Emily. I know we need to do data, but I don't think data is the only thing that should drive us. We should be driven by the concept of effectiveness and not efficiency. And all data gives us is whether we are efficient. So I think we need to change the construct intellectually, how we think about the space that we are in, and then ensure that every single individual feels that they are part of humanity and they can show up. And I don't care whether you write a check, whether you go help the lady cross the street, whether you go buy somebody groceries, or you write $1 million check. So it's a different way of encouraging people to become part of what has become this exclusive community. We are givers, we are philanthropists, we are data driven, we make these significant decisions for world change. So I think we need to kind of rethink that structure that we are in.
I like that. It's a good way to reframe it. Richard?
Yeah, I want to weigh in a little bit on tying some of this together, if I may. First of all, I'm very happy about that last set of comments because I do a lot of things internationally. And there are whole sections of the world that take issue with the very word philanthropy because they feel exactly as we're responding to that it's really a measure of Western wealthy, even colonial kind of intervention in places and doesn't accurately reflect the long history of local involvement. The local philanthropy, small giving philanthropy, small involvement, voluntarism, and generosity is not something that's brand new. It's not something that is developed in response to the big ticket kind of philanthropy. Quite the contrary. Local giving, involvement on the community level, on a voluntary basis, on a financial basis, on a generosity basis, is international, and there's no place in the world that doesn't exist, and there's no place in the world where it's only the big giving. It's only when you begin to give so much visibility to the mega rich and to the mega philanthropic dollars that people begin to feel that their own giving doesn't matter. But in fact, I used to give it just consistent with the previous conversations. I have a talk that I sometimes get called "How to Be a Philanthropist on $5 a Week," and people are shocked to hear that. And you can demonstrate how that can make a difference depending on what you're trying to accomplish and the degree to which you are empowered and the degree to which you make good decisions about how you want to influence your community. So I think this discussion is really an appropriate corrective to some of the big headlines about what philanthropy is about, and shows that in fact it's something that's quite international, quite universal, and quite a part of the human condition to feel that you can in your life make a difference for people one way or another, no matter how much money you have, no matter how much time you have, and no matter what your personal circumstances. And so I think we have to emphasize that. We can get sophisticated about how you make those decisions and what kind of and what kind of impact you want to have. But we have to start at the base level, recognizing that all of us matter, all of our time matters, all of our dollars matter, and all of our personalities matter in terms of making the world a better place.
I think, Richard and Akhtar, you are literally, saying exactly what the work that Emily and I do, right? When we talk about philanthropy, and the reason why, the organization that I lead is called Philanthropy Together was really on purpose. We knew that word philanthropy is a really, charged word for a lot of people. And we wanted to reclaim it in the sense of the word, it's love of humanity. And we always talk about, the 5 T's of collective giving, which is really around abundance, right? As you said, Akhtar, it's not about money. It's about, the 5 T's of collective giving are time, talent, treasure, testimony, and ties. And of course, your time, it's the time that you volunteer, the talent, the skills that you give to the organizations that you care about. The testimony and the ties sometimes are a little bit more nuanced, right? Or difficult to understand. And the testimony is, how do you use our voice to advocate for those causes that we care about? How do we bring other people along? And same with the ties, right? How do we open our networks to support the organizations that we care about? And Richard, you said it beautifully. This is not new. It's not American. It's something that has been going on for millennia all over the world. So how, when people tell Emily or I, like, oh, what you guys are doing is really innovative, it's like, it is not. We're just going back to basics, and the basics of humanity, of looking at each other, as brothers, as sisters, and helping one another. And you mentioned the $5 a week, right? There is a beautiful initiative that got started in Australia this summer with a lot of young people. And it's called $5. They give $5 a week.
Yeah.
And they're all getting together, to support the different causes that they care about. So yes, I feel that we're all in the same
I
channel.
love your 5 T's, so I'm going to steal it, Sarah. I
They're
think
not
that
mine. They're for all of us.
I love this concept of tie, right? That it is that humans only exist because we have ties.
Yes.
Otherwise, we are not humans, right? It's that social community. So I just love the thing. And when Emily kind of mentioned this whole concept of purposeful giving, what I have decided to do, and this is not a criticism, or it's just that I am more focused on living with purpose in everything that you do, and how you show up on every action you take, whether it is for yourself, for your family, for your community, for your faith, in your work. And if you now do that, that shifts the way in which we either form giving circles, or we come up in a formalized way or an informal way. But the real thing we're trying to do is to really get humanity to recognize, individuals to recognize, as humans, we take collective action for the betterment of the community at large, and not just for ourselves. And I think that's really what we want to focus on.
That's powerful. I'm hearing that perhaps time is our most valuable currency. Of course, it is for everybody. We have a finite amount of time. Let's go to segment 2.
Giving circles are a form of collective philanthropy where individuals pool resources, funds, time, and expertise to support charitable causes. This collaborative approach enhances the impact of individual contributions by enabling larger grants, fostering shared decision-making, and building a sense of community. To start a giving circle, define the group's size, funding expectations, and shared values. Decide on meeting frequency, grant processes, and financial logistics. For managing contributions, platforms like GrowFund or JustFund can streamline operations. For those interested in joining an existing circle, networks like the Global Giving Circle Directory can help connect you with groups aligned to your interests or values. Successful initiatives like the Latino Giving Circle Network and Battery Powered show how giving circles address community-specific issues and fund pressing causes through informed, collaborative decisions. Collective philanthropy through giving circles democratizes giving and strengthens social bonds, offering a meaningful way to amplify individual efforts and drive impactful change.
And we're going to start the happy dance here.
Well, that was an exciting intro to all the things or summary overview of all the things we've been talking about, Sara, in our space.
Yes, totally. Go ahead, Emily, because I feel that, what we're missing in that intro is when, we're talking about platforms. It's not because you are here. But I have always said this, the best platform for, streaming everything around giving circles is Grapevine to get your giving circle started, right? This is the easiest way to do it. And giving circles are, just about 4 different things. We talked in the intro about, the logistics, but for me is you create a sense of belonging, you open a space for discourse because you get different perspectives from people. You give with trust, your 5 T's, and then you act in abundance, right? For me, that's the key aspects.
Yeah, and thank you for that, for sharing that, Sara, about Grapevine. Yeah, I did just want to note in that last little segment, and hi, Andy, welcome back. We were just kind of jumping in, but I did just want to note that one of the platforms that was mentioned, actually we collaborated with and have kind of merged with, in a sense, Grow Fund being one that was supporting giving circles for a while. They've now moved over to grapevine.org, which is the platform that I run that's specifically focused on collaborative giving. So giving circles primarily, but also collaborative funds and donor collaboratives and a variety of different collaborative ways that people are coming together to pool money and then decide as a group where to grant those resources. And so as the little summary shared, some pretty clear steps in terms of coming together, align around your values, decide the cadence at which you want to give together. There are really wonderful resources out there, both at Philanthropy Together on Sara's organization site and at Grapevine to help you think through those steps very clearly. And then when you're ready to get started, I think this is where we often see the breakdown. It's like, okay, now how do we actually do this? And that's where we at Grapevine really try to support the movement. So just in a couple minutes, you can set up your Giving Circle page on Grapevine and have that easy place to communicate and collaborate with members, as well as pool donations and grant funds out and get charitable receipts and all of that. So just trying to take some of the higher level concepts and help people find their way toward implementing it if you want to start your own group. But I also just want to acknowledge the great resource that was shared also in that intro, the Global Giving Circle Directory, which Philanthropy Together, Sara's team, and our team at Grapevine collaborated to build that, where you can now go and search to find a group near you. There are over 4,000 in the directory, or focused on a cause you care about, and see if there's a community out there for you. And I just want to kind of close by tying this back to what was shared earlier about the importance of community, the importance of the social piece of this. We actually see a lot of people give in community. That's the way they like to give. It's the way they prefer to give. We're also just seeing, I would say, in the broader philanthropic ecosystem, concern around donor retention, donor engagement. And I think part of that is because a lot of our existing methodologies in nonprofit philanthropy work has not brought that piece in as much as it should. And so I think this collaborative model is a really great model for that, but just generally this idea of more social based, using an impact related work, I think is really critical to keep those donors engaged and people feeling really positive about the work that they can have.
If I can come in, one of the things that I think is important is the degree to which this model is used in youth philanthropy. Now, it's one of the fastest growing areas in the philanthropy world, at least in the United States. I can't say internationally as I could earlier, is in youth philanthropy. And the model that works with in youth philanthropy, teenagers and even some people younger than teenagers, is exactly the same model that you were just describing. And it doesn't. And one of the things that's interesting is that, if you have a group of teenagers that have put $10 or $15 into a pot, I guarantee that there is no executive director that will not meet with them if they're being considered for a grant. Whereas I suspect that a group of community people sitting around with $1,000 on the table may not be able to get to the executive director. But nobody says no to a group of teenagers, no matter how much money they have. And this giving model that you've just described is a great way for younger people to learn what giving is about, to learn how to make the decisions, and interestingly enough, how to have influence. So I just want to say how much this really has a derivative impact in terms of our field.
Richard, if you get a group of young people together, what questions do you ask to get them started?
I kind of say, why do we need to ask? I mean, they're smart enough; they'll figure it out. Marlene Ihon, who's now she's become this anti-philanthropy movement and tax people, where she's just a 30-year-old who just inherited a lot of wealth as part of the BASF Foundation in Germany. And she created this incredible approach where she gave away $27 million that she inherited by getting the community in Austria to come together and decide where the money would go. And she got 50 people together and got them to go out and look at the most important issues that they thought was, and divide her $27 million across the spectrum in Austria. So I think that there is just so much of innovation that young people are going to do that we really need to let them come up with different ways of doing it and not necessarily create models that everybody needs to follow. And I think that there is just this enormous amount. Today, there is $70 trillion of wealth that has come into the hands of the young generation. They're going to do all sorts of different things that we as traditionalists are not going to be able to figure out. So I think in some ways, giving power to people to behave and get them to actually think about responsibility and responsible showing up in an authentic way is really, that is what is going to encourage people to show up. In the 5 T's that was so well articulated by Sara, and I think where the giving circles is, of course, it's one of the most beautiful things that has happened, right? That we've just taken the self-help movement with groups. Historically, developing countries, self-help groups have formed. Self-help groups have formed here in this country, and we've kind of made it for philanthropy and giving. But at the end of the day, it is just this ties that we are actually trying to create that allow for people to network with each other and see where they want to invest in the way that they want to invest. And I think it's just giving circles. I think it's one of the most absolutely phenomenal things that have happened.
And I think, Andy, because of your audience, a giving circle is something that is really attractive for multi-generational families, right? When they are talking about, they may have a giving strategy, or they may have been supporting X, number of causes. When they are trying to involve the next generation or the extended family, a lot of families go through, a model of a giving circle to start getting, the younger generation. And Richard, is totally correct about how impactful this model is for young people. Emily and I know this amazing young woman that she not only started her own giving circle and got 180 teenagers in Arizona to move about $50,000 in a couple of years, but she has helped start 25 teenage giving circles, not only in the US, but also in Germany, in Pakistan, in Canada. So yes, and they do their own thing, as Akhtar said, like they are not, following a specific model. They get together, they order food, they get a DJ, they have fun. They have fun with it, right? Yeah. Like that is also the secret of a giving circle. Is social, is fun. That is why people gravitate around this model.
Well, I love Akhtar's message, just to get out of the way. Let it happen organically. Emily, I'm curious, at Grapevine, have you seen giving circles like enabling people so that there's more diversity among givers and more participation?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think generally this model of the giving circle is seen as a force for diversifying and democratizing philanthropy, because it is engaging a broader diversity of people across economic spectrums, across racial and cultural spectrums, across age. And so it's a model that is, I like to say, is adopted and adapted by a wide range of people. As Sara was just sharing about the teenage woman who started her own group and then helped others, right? She saw a model, and I do think sometimes we're a little paralyzed by not knowing how to get started. So I do think sharing a model like the Giving Circle is really very helpful for people to see something and then say, oh, that's great, but I'd like to do it slightly differently, right? Like I'd like to take my own version of that. And we see that at Grapevine quite a bit with people who want to get started, want to engage in philanthropy, and see this as a model that they can work with and kind of make their own. But it's an easy way to get started. There's something clear enough there for them to move forward with. And so anyway, we do see a broad range of diversity on the platform in terms of people who are starting these groups, who are joining these groups. And in general, as the kind of tech provider in this space, right? That infrastructure layer, what we are seeing generally is that those groups on our platform, from a study that we did, the age range, the average age on the Grapevine platform is actually younger than the average age in the broader Giving Circle movement based on studies of the movement. And so we see more of like the Gen X age being the most typical age on our platform. Certainly have older, certainly have younger. And I think, Sada, correct me if I'm wrong, it's more boomer age segment is kind of the most active in the Giving Circle movement according to the broader studies of the field.
Yeah, you're right. It's not the boomer, but maybe Gen X. Yes, like, it's basically women in their, 50s or 60s. That's, the big audience for Giving Circles. But the whole idea when we got started 5 years ago was to do that, right? How can we supercharge the collective giving movement to to those giving circles that are diverse and young exist? How can we get them all together? So we have seen in the last 5 years, these new giving circles with younger people, with a lot of people of color, different, different faiths, socioeconomic status. We always said, when one giving circle, one giving circle, because there's anything under the sun. Like, there are giving circles around whiskey. If you imagine that, like, a group of men that like whiskey, they get together, they taste whiskey, and they give money to different nonprofits. So you can do pick your own journey.
I love the community aspect, both in organizing, but then I think implementation, right? It's like, if you have a community of people, there's a increased likelihood that they're going to be donating within their community that they know. Anyone else want to chime in on this segment?
Well, I just want to, I think finding a way to encourage young people to show up with purpose is great. And whatever tools, strategies, technology that can be developed that can make it easy is something that we should be encouraging young people to do. Because at the end of the day, it is their life, their time, their connection, their resources, and it is the world that they want to see created. So I think giving circles to me are just the starting block of mobilizing a movement. And I think Emily said it well, that this is a movement. And we really should be focused on how we create movements so that people show up with joy. And this example of the whiskey circle, I think, is just fantastic. It is people showing up with joy. And what we want people to do is to use this as a way by which they're spreading joy. And joy can be spread in a collective way. Happiness is very hard to spread collectively. I want people to reflect on that.
Beautifully said. Spread the joy. So we're going to move to segment 3.
Technology has transformed philanthropy, making giving more accessible, transparent, and impactful. Crowdfunding platforms like GoFundMe allow individuals to start or support fundraising campaigns directly, broadening reach and enabling swift responses to needs. For strategic long-term giving, donor-advised funds offer a tax-efficient way to manage donations. Platforms like Fidelity Charitable simplify the process, enabling donors to invest, grow, and allocate funds over time. Online giving portals, such as Classy.org, integrate with social media to boost visibility and donor engagement. These platforms provide tools like personalized campaigns and analytics, helping nonprofits reach a wider audience and optimize fundraising. Technology also enhances transparency and accountability. Real-time updates and innovations like blockchain and crypto donations ensure donors see how their contributions are used. With data analytics, nonprofits can make informed decisions, track impact, and allocate resources effectively. Embracing these digital tools allows philanthropists to maximize reach, streamline processes, and ensure their contributions make a meaningful difference.
Emily, can you share a success story where the platform significantly enhanced a Giving Circle's ability to create change?
Sure, Andy. I'm happy to jump in on that. I mean, there are so many examples to choose from, but I would say maybe just more of a moment in time. Grapevine launched March 31st, 2020. We were not intending to launch at this moment when we were all headed into this COVID era, but that is what happened. And a lot of these grassroots giving circles that had been meeting in person, literally people writing checks, all putting them in the hat, and then someone volunteering to drive them down to the nonprofit, they couldn't do that anymore, right? And this was at the moment when resources were needed more than ever, and flexibility. To that great segment just gave us a nice intro on this, like the flexibility of funds and the immediacy of funds that you can get from crowdfunding or some of these other tools like DAFs, for example. That's really important in moments like that. And so what we were able to do at Grapevine is help move a large number of giving circles who had been primarily offline, move them online, help them pool their resources, come together and collaborate online as well, and make those decisions and get that funding out to those local nonprofits immediately, so that they could support those frontline workers and people who really needed help, whose jobs were no longer around, and they didn't yet have money coming in from the government, for example. So that is just one example of how technology has taken this very old, to Sara's point, model, that's been around forever, but really enabled it to be more impactful and more responsive to the current moment, which, I think it's so critical for these old school models. I think for us to remember, like, the human element, what is it inherently that's human about this that makes us love this model, whether it's a giving circle model or, other forms of collaborative kind of giving through junior leagues and Rotary clubs, right? These are all older versions of this kind of model, but how do we bring those forward so that they are as relevant as possible for the times and can be as impactful for the moment that we're in today?
Yeah, that's a great point. So let me pose to the rest of the panel, what role does technology play in balancing the human connection in philanthropy while scaling collective impact?
So, and let me come in a little bit with both a positive and a caution. On the positive level, it allows people to really take ownership of where they give, to make sure that there's an alignment between their own priorities and with as little overhead as possible. And I think that that's terrific. What on the flip side, though, is that it removes the intermediary where there is some ability to evaluate what's being funded. In other words, when you talk about a giving circle, that intermediary is a different kind of intermediary because it's a group making that decision. In the old days, when a United Way was doing it, whether you like the bureaucracy of United Way, there was an intermediary that could do an assessment. With some of the online models, you have the benefits of being able to be quick about it and being efficient about it and to remove the overhead. At the same time, you're subject to you may not have the knowledge. You may be fooled into thinking that some a claim of a nonprofit is more credible than it really is, or that it's real. So we have to be cautious about this. The technology. It's a terrific advance in the ability to make decisions and to make giving, but we also have to make sure that we built in an educational component so people know how to do it in a way that they're accomplishing what they want to accomplish and not fall prey to scams.
Akhtar, your thoughts?
I'm actually going to let Sara first talk, and then I'm going to come.
No, I want to say, something that for me, it's really positive. And we also saw it during the pandemic because, as Emily mentioned, Grapevine started March 31st. We started April 1st of 2020. And Yeah, the beauty of technology is that there are no, like, we can take away geographic barriers, right? In the universe of collective giving, that was really key, because we saw, I mean, the majority of giving circles are very local because people want to give their 5 T's, right? They want to volunteer, they want to really support the organizations in the background. And on the other hand, there were many people that said, I would love to start a giving circle with my high school friends, right? But now we all live in different states and different cities. So technology allowed people to be together in a different way, right? Extended families, friends, also the fact that, and this is the silver lining of the COVID years, everybody learned how to use Zoom or FaceTime, or everybody was online, right? And that also make it a lot easier to do not leave money on the table. As Emily said, like, the first thing was like, okay, you are going to give grants, please don't stop. Like, we will help you. We will, support you paying your Zoom account for a couple of months until everybody in your giving circle learns to use it. But we cannot leave money on the table, right? So for me, that is something that is really beautiful about technology. And in many ways, and Richard, to your point of the education part of things, it has been an equalizer, right? Because people have access to information that before, we needed to go, to the library, or to go and visit the organizations, et cetera, et cetera. And now it's more accessible. But I totally understand your comment around caution.
Yes, technology has brought in all these phenomenal benefits. And every age, technology has shifted in the way humanity shows up. And internet, digital technology is now showing us how we need to step up. And it's made things, again, efficient. What is interesting is if you kind of look at the actual giving, those numbers have not increased. Right? So money that was written by checks has now gone online. Monies that were being walked to the neighborhood bank has now gone somewhere else. But at least in the US, the majority of the amount that is still being collected is through religious donations and religious institutions. When I was interviewing Bill Gates for my book, I mean, that's one of the things that he was most disappointed in, is that we've invested so much in technology and we've kind of opened all of these doors and we've created all of these tools, but it has not fundamentally put how people show up in the way we want to measure it, through dollars given, on a rocket ship, and completely change the trajectory of how things are going to happen. Now, it may still happen in the next decade or so with AI, which might actually change the way in which we are able to rethink what it means for someone like Bill Gates, who was forced by his father to go stand at the corner in Seattle with a placard for Planned Parenthood as a child. Or the mother basically saying, lick these envelopes because I've gone out into the neighborhood and collected all this money. That's a formative experience that comes through family. How are we replicating that? What is technology doing? Is it just making it us seem that we can go on Facebook and like something and that makes us a giver? or is it something more? So I think that, to me, is something that we all need to think about now, that we've got the tools, we've got the technology, we've got embedded users, we've got platforms that can scale. It is actually absolutely, Sarah is correct, right? I mean, it is, equalized. It has, created access. It is universal. Anybody can participate with small amounts of efforts, but it has not fundamentally increased our giving. I mean, as measured by money. So we need to be thinking more about that now. That what would it take now that we have all the tools in place? It's fantastic with Giving Tuesday, right? I mean, every year more and more money is given through Giving Tuesday, but the actual amount of giving over the year is not increasing appreciably. So how do we kind of rethink, right? So yes, there are dApps and there's Fidelity and all of these things, and young people are making extreme wealth at much earlier age, but yet there seems to be a disconnect.
Interesting points. While I appreciate the likes, I hope that it's so much more. Let's go to segment 4.
Ethical philanthropy involves aligning donations with personal and societal values, conducting due diligence on charities, and maintaining transparency. Start by reflecting on your values and choosing causes that resonate deeply, like environmental sustainability or healthcare, to ensure your contributions support meaningful change. Integrating environmental, social, and governance principles can amplify the societal impact of your giving. Before donating, research organizations thoroughly. Use tools like Charity Navigator and GuideStar to review mission statements, financial health, and impact reports. Selecting transparent and accountable charities increases the likelihood that your donations are used effectively and ethically. In giving, prioritize financial transparency by clearly communicating how funds are used. Adopt ethical fundraising practices that avoid misleading donors and honor donor intentions. Continuously evaluate the impact of your contributions by seeking feedback and making necessary adjustments. Ethical philanthropy is a dynamic commitment requiring ongoing reflection to ensure that donations create positive, lasting change.
Okay, Richard, I've been waiting this whole episode to ask you, what is Philanthroethics and how should it guide us?
Thank you very much. So I'm not going to give a lecture because we only have a few minutes. We are talking about the fact that as in every part of life, there is an intersection of how we live our life, the values that inform it, and the behaviors that emerge from it. So I just want to talk a little bit about the philanthropy, the ethics side from the giver side, from the funder side. And very often, the issue is not so much the assessment of the organizations, but the behavior of the funders. Funders who are giving money, especially large sums of money, have a tendency to take for granted that they have power. What they don't often realize is the degree to which they distort the way they get information because of that use of power. So how do they learn to control for their power? How do they make sure that their power is not in the way of the organizations that they want to fund, giving them honest information, giving them useful information? And so that one of the elements of ethics that is really a starting point from a funder perspective is, how does one understand the limits of power and therefore the implicit unethical use of power when dealing with potential grantees? So that's part of it. Now, one of the ways we do that, and this is where it crosses into the fundraising side as well, and that is transparency. One of the ways in which we get to this is, of course, there's legal transparency, but there's also functional transparency. If we're a funder and we want to tell somebody to apply for funds from us, we have to tell them how it's going to work. When are they going to get an answer? What information do we really need to have? What's the proportionate amount of information that we have a right to ask for? That transparency of our process, our decision making, and what we want to accomplish makes us good funders. Just as in your video, you talked about the need for organizations to be able to be transparent so that we know that the money that is being raised is being used for what we want it to be used for, and not inappropriately. So one of the key elements, either from a legal perspective and also from an ethical perspective, is transparency. And as I started, to make sure that there's a balancing of the playing field so that it's safe for people that want money to be able to give honest responses to the people that want to give the money. So that's a starting point to discussion, but I'll leave it there for now.
I mean, I think Richard is making a fantastic point, right? Because he's basically highlighting this whole concept of trust-based philanthropy. And how are we as funders looking at trust? And then how are we as those that are on the ground doing work, the proximate folks, thinking about trust? And I just want to give you one little nugget. I was doing a panel discussion for Global Washington, which is one of the organizations here in Washington State that promotes international giving and philanthropy and development. And at our annual conference, it was during COVID, so we were not meeting in person. We are doing it over Zoom. And we had these two conversations. We actually had a conversation around trust-based giving with the folks in the field. So take your major, I won't name them, but nonprofit organizations and their CEOs, and then the people on their staff, and a conversation with them as to how they thought about trust-based philanthropy. And here is what one of the persons who was actually in Malawi said. When COVID happened, all of the international staff left. We could not leave. We had to be in the community. Yet for us to get $5,000 because now the person from the headquarters was not there, we had to go through hoops to justify that investment. Where is the trust? Because you've actually now set up systems of reporting, writing, and all of that now makes your head spin and say, you left, you were not there, it's not your community, it's my community, and you're not trusting me to do the right thing. So as funders, we need to kind of step back from this craziness that we've set up in terms of our systems to say, no, this is not effective. And how do we trust humans? And how do we trust people that are proximate to these issues? And even if you lose 5,000, so what? It's not the end of the world. So this notion of how we kind of encourage people to rebuild trust, that it's not people who actually write checks that know what's going on. It is that people that are on the ground doing things, wherever that may be, whether it's an inner city neighborhood in Seattle or a community in Malawi, actually are living it. And there has to be, and that to me is what ethical philanthropy should become, that it should become trust-based.
I love that perspective. And if I may just jump in, because I do feel like the Giving Circle movement really largely follows this trust-based philanthropy
Absolutely.
concept. And it's interesting too, when you think about Akhtar, what you're saying, and the people who are living in the community, you can have the funders, the people writing the checks, also in the community, right, with people who are doing the work. And I think when you bring those two sides together, and I shouldn't even say it that way, two sides, when you bring all of these people together, because often, each of us are both of those things at different times, and sometimes at the same time. And so that's where there can be this real magic, I think. And that trust, where you're coming together and you're aligning around shared values and you're doing something meaningful in your community together. I also just believe so strongly in this model of people finding alignment and doing something positive together that they can see and feel proud of as being really powerful to build and strengthen our social fabric at a time where people have a hard time talking to each other across differences of opinion and perspective on things. I actually see this model bringing people together across difference and helping to create that trust. That's really important for this kind of work to happen and for these organizations to get that much needed support. So I just want to I really appreciate everything that you just said, and I feel like this is really such a core part of the kind of model that Sara and I work on all the time that we believe so strongly in.
Thank you.
Yeah, and trust comes from relationships, right?
Yes,
And
exactly.
and yeah, totally. And we always say that, as Emily explained, with giving circles, like the very first thing that you do when you join a giving circle, when you start a giving circle, is creating that sense of belonging, is seeing it as getting to know the other person, what moves you, what are those values that inform your life and inform your giving, what are the common values of the group. And as Emily explained, right, we can come from very different backgrounds, very different political affiliations. We can be really, really different, but we find the commonality. We find what makes us human, what makes us similar. And I have a beautiful colleague in a previous job that said that, in a given circle, you give like you would give to a family member. You look that person in the eyes. So those lines between giver and receiver get completely blurred because we're all from the same community. We want the same, the same things to happen. So
I
Sorry,
just have one more
I just
thing.
want to let me make one comment. So I used the word relationship. And one of the things when I teach funders, I say to them, don't talk about a relationship. That for me, the measure of the healthy relationship with a nonprofit is if they can say no to you. If they don't feel safe
yes.
saying no to you, then in fact, you don't really have the relationship that you think you have. So that I think is that I look for a very simple metric. If a grantee can say no to a funder, or a potential grantee can say no to a funder, then that means that there's a level of trust that can that can move the discussion along. So while we can talk abstractly, I look at that one single metric as a measure of what the health of the relationship is.
So, Sarah, I really loved what you just said, right? That it's about how you treat someone as part of your family. Generosity, you can be generous to anybody at any given time. Empathy comes in when you're actually in a familiar environment. You are empathetic with your family, with your friends, your close friends. And compassionate giving is really when you get to a point where you are purposeful in being part of anybody that you are trying to engage with as if they were part of your extended family. And I completely agree that giving circles are one of the few tools that allow you to do that because you become familiar. And that to me becomes that purpose-driven approach of how you show up. So I just love the fact that, trust to me is the most important thing. And at some point, we can't let tools and systems and measurement override trust because trust is a human endeavor, right?
Yep.
All these other things are systems to actually make us feel that we've checked the box. So we need to kind of figure out, when you use both. Of course, the other piece is also necessary. But at times we now go way onto the other side that unless we've checked all the boxes, you're not going to trust anybody.
So many beautifully stated ideas in this segment. Let's bring it home with the last segment.
Social entrepreneurship combines business with a mission to tackle societal challenges, creating ventures that achieve both financial sustainability and social impact. Unlike traditional businesses focused solely on profit, social entrepreneurs develop models that address issues like poverty, health, and environmental sustainability. For instance, Tom's Shoes popularized the one-for-one model, donating a pair of shoes for each one sold. Over time, they've adapted this model to deepen their impact by partnering with community organizations. Monarch Tractor offers another example, producing fully electric, autonomous tractors to reduce carbon emissions in agriculture. By integrating environmental responsibility with innovative technology, they demonstrate how social entrepreneurship can address ecological issues while remaining economically viable. To balance impact with financial sustainability, social entrepreneurs often use hybrid business models, ensuring that profit and purpose go hand in hand. They also leverage partnerships with corporations or governments to scale their efforts, proving that collaboration can amplify both financial and social returns.
So Richard, how does social entrepreneurship and philanthropy intersect?
So I think I'm just going to speak very personally here. I've been in the philanthropy world for a long time, and not surprised, and I've been teaching funders on the university level for over 25 years. So clearly, it's something I've thought about. So it wasn't surprise you that a good number of years ago, Meryl and I went through the process of making sure that our own philanthropic decisions were consistent with the kinds of ways in which we taught it. But a few years ago, we decided to go one step further, and we decided that we should also align our investable assets with our values as well. And I'm pleased to say that 100% of our investable assets are now values aligned. Now, I suspect that would be much harder for some foundations that are as big as the Gates Foundation. The alignment there is probably more challenging than it is for people with the size of our pockets, but it's something we take seriously. What that means is that we try to make a determination as to what's going to be the best model to solve a particular social problem. There's certain kinds of social problems that continue and will forever be philanthropic kinds of involvements. There's no way that government, there's no way the private sector are going to be sufficient to solve certain kinds of problems. On the other hand, there's other kinds of issues that are better or more effectively solved by private investments. And the challenge is not that there's one or the other. I really reject those that say the private sector is always better than philanthropy or philanthropy is always better than the other. Rather, it's a continuum. You have to make a decision in a particular case. What's going to be the best use of your dollars in this case to solve a social problem, either on the local level, the national level, the international level, the scientific level, and so social entrepreneurship is a way in which we use values informing our private investments, but to accomplish a social good. And I think that continuum is something that all of us can take very seriously.
Thank you for sharing your personal experience. So, asking the rest of the panel, does corporate profit and social impact need to be thought of separately? Can they coexist?
So I've been teaching social enterprise and social entrepreneurship since the early 2000s, and I launched multiple social enterprises and funded them. I think there are two separate questions. One is social entrepreneurship as a distinct phase, and Tom's Shoes is not a social enterprise. It has never been a social enterprise. It was a marketing. And in doing so, in its early part, it actually destroyed the local shoe industry in Kenya because shoes were just dumped there. So one needs to be very careful as to how you actually present certain things that become, in popular minds, that Tom's Shoes created this one-to-one model. It's kind of challenging to actually think about it. There is corporate philanthropy, which is companies that make money who decide that they are going to give away a portion of their money, whether through investments, social investments, or through employee-based donations, two completely separate things, versus somebody that is actually creating an enterprise, which is saying we are going to focus our enterprise on a social cause. Even there, it is a continuum. I can argue that Tesla is a social enterprise. Without Tesla, you would not have the consumer market for battery-operated cars. You would not have your example of the tractor being developed, which is totally EV. But Tesla is not serving the poorest of the poor. There are other organizations that basically create social enterprises and start to serve the middle class. They may be in the education space, they may be in the environment space, they may be in the healthcare space. But there are other organizations that actually serve the poorest of the poor by creating a model which says we will charge you a small fee for the service that is delivered, and we'll take that money and reinvest it to expand the services. That's a social business. Two very different things. One is following a venture model with investments being taken and returns being given back to their investors. Very hard to serve that to the poorest of the poor. Very hard to do that on women's empowerment or pregnancy or health in certain cases. But in other cases, you can. So I think there is a continuum in which all of these need to function. Companies need to show up in an effective way. Companies need to invest back into the community in which they exist. Innovators are coming up with different models by which they're saying that giving and philanthropy is just one tool which is necessary. But there are investment dollars, and people are willing to take smaller returns on investment because they want to seed the market, like Skoll Foundation and others are doing, because they want to create microfinance, or they want to create life insurance for the poor, or they want to create certain kinds of models that can actually reach the poorest of the poor. So I think we need to think about it as a continuum and allow for each of these to function. But in each, we need to be careful as to how we are investing the money and for what purposes and what returns you are expecting. Because sometimes the biggest thing is a mismatch where you actually say, I'm going to go invest in the poorest of the poor and become a billionaire. That's not going to happen. And if that happens, then there is something totally wrong with what you're doing.
Emily, your thoughts?
Thank you. Yeah, I'd love to jump in. I completely agree with Richard and Akhtar here in terms of it being a continuum. And in order, I mean, there's so much need. There's so much need for us to do more, right? And so we need to use all the resources we have available. And certainly there's a lot more investment capital out there than there is philanthropic capital. Yeah. And so we need to unlock those resources for change as well. So I think from a funding perspective and from an alignment with your values perspective, like Richard was talking about, it makes complete sense to me as well. I would also just like to add, as a social entrepreneur myself, who runs an organization that has, or two organizations that work collaboratively. We have a nonprofit arm and a social enterprise arm. The legal structures out there haven't necessarily been set up to support some of these innovative social programs and work that we're doing. So for people in my position, we're kind of trying to figure out, should I start a nonprofit, but then it falls apart here? Should I start a company, but then it falls apart here? So a lot of other social entrepreneurs like myself who I've spoken to end up kind of trying to piece something together that's going to make the impact and the work happen. And often that does also include thinking through funding, because these different sources of capital also have different risk appetites and different moments, I have found anyway in my experience, where they can be particularly helpful. For example, for us getting started, it was actually much easier for us to get angel capital within the social enterprise, people willing to take a bet through this trust-based model of investing in the founder and the vision, than it was for us to get philanthropic capital in that earliest stage. But once we had been operating for some years and had some impact to show and could prove more about, the work that we were doing and the value of it, then that opened the door to some philanthropic capital as well. And so I think for anyone in this space, being really thoughtful about these models, both as a funder and the resources you have and how you can leverage all of them to create the most impact possible, but also as an operator, right? A practitioner who's trying to build an organization and think about its longer term sustainability. It's really important to think about these models. And they often, I will just close by saying, they're often not this pool of capital and this pool of capital. What we're seeing more now is innovation in the sector too, where some of these things are coming together. For example, donor advised funds were mentioned earlier, and that is a charitable bank account essentially, right? Where you can put money in, donate it, get that tax receipt, and then grant it out over time to nonprofits. Well, there are now some donor advised fund sponsors that will let those donors, once they donate into that DAF account, they will then let that donor advise on what impact investments they want that money to be used for in the meantime. So it can be invested in smaller social enterprises like my organization, Grapevine, or ESG investments in the public market. So, I think there's just more and more overlap in these areas as well.
Yeah, it can be multi-dimensional.
Mm-hmm.
Sara, how about a closing thought?
I totally agree with the three of them. I have nothing to add on this particular, segment. What I just want to say is that at the end of the day, companies, corporations, businesses are made of what? People, right? And at the end of the day, what people craves? Connection and engagement. And, we know that there is this generosity crisis going on. That a lot of people are not going to places of faith as much as they used to do it 50, 30 years ago. So and again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but that is why the model of collective giving is so attractive for me, because what you do in a collective giving group doesn't matter the amount of money that gets passed through that, is creating those connections. And again, bringing different perspectives together. We have seen, companies that are, looking to this kind of model as a way also to engage their employees and their team members, right? We see it with the younger generation. I'm Gen X. We used to work our motivations to join a company when I was in my 20s were very different as the motivations that my three children who are in their 20s have right now, right? People want to be values aligned in everything. So I feel there is a big opportunity for every single company, even if they are not a total, social enterprise, to be a lot more intentional and mindful in how do they support, their communities where they have a footprint, and how they are intentional in engaging all their people in generosity.
Before we end, can I make just a couple of sentences at the end? It's the timing of this particular taping is crucial. We happen to be living in the United States, and frankly, in many places in the world, with a very dystopian atmosphere. We talk about philanthropy, but there's a lot of attitudes out there that are quite skeptical of the nature of civil society, dubious about the willingness of government to take care of its citizens, questioning whether, in fact, the private sector really does have any commitment to the people that work for them. The sector that we represent, the philanthropy sector, has the potential to be the source of credibility and a place of rebuilding civil society confidence if we use this moment properly, if we use our wisdom properly, if we use our resources properly, and if we understand that, in fact, there is something that we have to contribute at a time of dystopia, that is remarkably the opposite of that perspective. So that while the conversation today was not specifically about the world atmosphere in which we live, I think it's important for us to acknowledge that that it's not that the role that we play is not incidental to what the future is going to look like. It's a responsibility that we have. We have to have courage to be able to respond to it with the humility that we might not always be correct. But that's what the moment calls for.
Well, thank you, Richard. Thank you to all our panelists for just an incredible conversation today. This has been an amazing panel, because even when I had technical difficulties and dropped off, this panel can run its own show. I'm not even necessary here. So I don't know about you, but I'm leaving this discussion feeling inspired and hopeful. Some of the takeaways from me: the power of doing more together. We can get so much more done together than we could ever do alone. And some of the takeaways are really: 1, show up; 2, you can figure it out; and 3, it's really as simple as trying to spread joy. So whether it's a giving circle, strategic philanthropy, social entrepreneurship, or the gray areas in between, we heard it over and over again. It's about how collaboration, connection, and intention are really going to help us to increase our impact. And I love the idea that any one of us, every one of us, can be a philanthropist. And it doesn't matter if you're donating $10 or leading with a major initiative or just giving some of your time. The matter is showing up. So as a call to action for everyone, find one step that you can take to give more intentionally this week. And I think try to connect, because there is some irony with all the technology and AI that we have. People are also more isolated than ever before. So just get out there, put yourself out there, make connections, and we can do this together, because small steps really do add up to big changes. Thank you, everyone. I want to encourage all the viewers, listeners, to follow our incredible panelists today. Sara Lomelin, you can find her at philanthropytogether.org. Dr. Akhtar Badshah, you can find him. I have a couple of websites, akhtarbadshah.com, as well as evans.uw.edu. Emily Rasmussen is founder and CEO of Grapevine. You can find more about Grapevine at grapevine.org. And Richard Marker, you can find him also a couple of places. I have wisephilanthropy.institute and impact.upenn.edu. I don't know if anybody else has other websites or things that they want to share. Everybody's good. Thank you to the panelists for being so generous with their time, their insights, and going extra today. Thank you for the extra mile. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. The next episode of Inspired Money will be next week. That's January 29th at 1 p.m. Eastern. We're talking about exploring passive income streams, creating financial freedom through passive investments. Until next time, do something that scares you, because that's where the magic happens. Thanks, everyone.